Hello, everybody. It's your boy, the Punk Otaku Scribe. Happy New Year! And before I get into the video proper, I do want to mention that the Godzilla -1 review is still coming. I promise. What's going on is that I have a lot more to say about it than I initially thought. I have a lot of feelings and thoughts about that movie. So I'm just putting it all together, and it's taking quite a while, but it is coming. Then after that will be my top 10 films of 2023 list. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. So with this video, we're back with another Monarch Legacy of Monsters episode review. However, I missed a couple because it's just been the holiday season, so I wasn't able to get these videos out. I've been watching the show week by week, of course, but I did miss reviewing them. So in this one, we're going to be looking at episodes 5 through 8. And at this point, the show's kind of falling apart for me. Leading up to the release of this show, I wasn't very excited about it. I didn't feel like we needed it. And I just felt like it was going to be just pointless. The show premiered. I watched the first 4 episodes. And with those episodes, especially with episode 4, I was prepared to make it through the end of the show and eat my words. And, decided to finally let my guard down about it and give the show a chance.
You fool!
Now with these next 4 episodes, 5 through 8, I'm starting to feel a little bit validated. I don't know what happened, man. It just seems like the show made a complete turnaround out of nowhere in quality and with some of these characters. My feelings on all of these episodes are pretty much the same, so this video, more or less, is going to be pretty straightforward. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there were a couple of moments in these 4 episodes that really impressed me, that I feel were good moments in lesser written episodes. For instance, in episode 5, we get some character development with Kate, where it shows that she's more like her father or it's revealed that she was more like her father than she originally thought. But then you got a moment right afterwards where we finally meet Kate's mom, and she's confronting her about, what she saw in Japan, and it comes to find out that Kate's mom knew that something was going on with Hiroshi, Kate and Kentaro's father. She didn't know the details, but she knew that in her heart of hearts there was something going on there. And because she knew, she didn't want to face it herself, so she sent her daughter out to see what was out there. Mother of the Year. That was sort of the problem on this batch of episodes, is it just turns out that every character in this show is an unlikable a-hole. Every last one of them. It was fine when it was just 1 or 2 characters that were unlikable, but at this point in the show, every one of them is. Quite obviously, Kate and Kentaro's father was. May sort of was, with how standoffish she was. Kate could be, but she wasn't really classified as that. With the reveal of her being just like Hiroshi, it turns out that she is an unlikable a-hole. It's fine when it's just 1 or 2 characters, but the whole cast sucks. They all do, both in the present timeline and in the past timeline. There's no one to root for at this point, and a lot of their motivations and their choices either come out of nowhere, make no sense, or are just, like I mentioned, unlikable. For instance, in episode 7, we'll get to episode 6 in a second, but in episode 7, Lee Shaw becomes a villain? For some reason, don't know where that came from. He just overtakes a Monarch outpost, and he wants to seal the gateways to the Hollow Earth by just blowing them up and killing the Titans that emerge from them in the process. And there is a reason behind that, and I'll get into that when we go into episode 6, which is also infuriating, but it was such a turnaround that made no sense. Narratively, it makes no sense. Even from the motivations being explained in episode 6 from the past, it's just out of nowhere. Because in episodes 1 through 5, he's the older guy, the older hero guy that's helping them. And then there's episode 6 that takes place entirely in the past. In episode 7, he's like mustache twirling villain. He's just evil all of a sudden. This show has no idea what it's doing. Okay, so I got ahead of myself a little bit there. Let's talk about episode 6, which was another example after episode 5 of there being something interesting narratively happening, but then gets coupled and kind of ruined by another subplot or piece of writing that either doesn't make sense or didn't even need to be there. In episode 6, it focuses entirely on the 1950s crew, and they meet this professor, I think he was a professor, that Keiko knows, who has invented a machine that creates a signal that calls out to the Titans. It eventually becomes a monster hunting episode where they're hunting for Godzilla, and it's really interesting. And when Godzilla shows up, it's a really cool scene. But this is completely interrupted and crapped all over with some subplot about Shaw and Keiko having had a fling or relationship or something, which, what's the point of that? Kate and Kentaro are Randas, born from the father Hiroshi, who is the son of Will Randa, who married Keiko, their grandmother. So what's the point of this? Why are they doing this? Not to mention, they could have had this whole storyline of Keiko having a relationship with Shaw and just put it with Will Randa. Even though I don't quite buy that Will Randa was the catalyst to all this and how it makes sense to the monsterverse, they could have just done that. Or they could have just not done that with Will Randa because that's ridiculous anyway, and just made it just Lee Shaw and have Lee Shaw be their grandfather. And with that, it also makes Will Randa completely pointless. In the 1950s, he's really not done much of anything. He's not that much of a focus. Lee is. Yeah, sure, he's helped cultivate a lot of the Monarch research, and he's supposed to be the one that brought Monarch to fruition, but they're really making it out to be that Lee Shaw was the one behind it, and was the one that helped Will Randa do that. But then what was the point of having Will Randa? He's had nearly no focus. Anders Holm hasn't done much of anything. I even have a friend who said that he didn't even realize that Anders Holm was supposed to be young Will Randa up until the day he and I were talking about it. That's how little attention the 1950s part of the storyline has put attention on him. And if it was going to be that little of attention, what was the point of making him the catalyst to all of this? Oh, I know, to connect it to the Monsterverse movies. That's why. Look, I understand I'm getting a little heated, but the fact is, with the way the story's being told, I just don't feel like we need both Will Randa and Lee Shaw here. You could take either one of them out and keep the same story. If you wanted the military connection for Monarch getting funding, you could just keep Lee Shaw and give the love story to Lee Shaw and Keiko, and have Keiko be the one that started Monarch, and maybe she met Will Randa later on. Or you could take Lee Shaw out completely, keep it Will Randa, and have him have a friend in the military that isn't a main character that helps him get the funding for Monarch. When you give Lee Shaw a love story with Keiko as the motivation for the present, it makes Will Randa pointless. Because they were the ones that got together. It only served as a motivation for Lee Shaw in the present to do what he's doing in episodes 7 and 8. But it didn't have to be a love triangle, especially one that is completely pointless. It could be just he's doing it for a friend, a dear friend that he loved dearly. But no, everything's got to be a love triangle. And I will talk more about that concerns the present timeline characters in just a second. Okay, so circling back around to episode 7. As I mentioned, Lee Shaw is evil now. And frankly, for a reason that is forced. You may buy it, some of you out there, but I don't. I feel like that whole love story thing with Keiko is pointless, and it was only there to serve as motivation for him to be evil in the present. That's how I feel about it. But there is something kind of interesting here in episode 7, and that is the backstory of May, who we find out is actually named Cora, and is named May because she's on the run from this company who she sabotaged. Any big tech company you can think of, that's who essentially they are, or who they were, and they would later on become Apex from Godzilla vs. Kong. At least it's heavily implied that they are. Anyway, she sabotages their servers because she wasn't being treated fairly in her work, and she saw them doing some pretty horrendous things. So she sabotages their network, goes on the run, and I really feel like this whole plot thread could have been its entire episode. Because it felt a little rushed here, but would she have come out looking any better despite it? I don't think so, because she has been pretty self-serving and unapproachable and unlikable this entire time, so I don't think it really matters. And speaking of her being unapproachable and unlikable and essentially a self-serving a-hole, this episode ends with her and Kate being an item. Sure, Monarch, you've been doing whatever you want this entire time. Why the hell not? Episode 8, I barely even want to dignify it with a response. I'll be honest, it was one ear and out the other because of episodes 5, 6, and 7, each of them getting worse than the last. But I will say that it's a lot more of Lee Shaw moaning and groaning about why he's doing what he's doing. And again, his motivation, forced, doesn't make sense. Or rather, it does make sense, it's just pointless. We didn't need it. And then he kills another Titan, and then it looks like Kate falls into the Hollow Earth. I don't know. They could be going to the Hollow Earth in the next episode. But man, dude, with these episodes, 5 through 8, this series has just gone downhill, really. This series started off really solid. In episodes 1 through 4, each episode getting increasingly better than the last. And then starting from episode 5 onward to episode 8, it just careened down a waterfall. I have no idea what happened. I don't know what happened to this writing. It's so baffling. There's 2 episodes left, and I don't know what they're going to do to salvage it. And big kaiju fights aren't going to be enough. The kaiju action that they'll inevitably have in the last 2 episodes, or even in the last episode, could be really great, but it's not going to make me forget how awful the human writing suddenly became out of nowhere. So, Monarch, I hope you got something really, really awesome up your sleeve, because as of right now, I've completely lost all faith in you, and you only have 2 episodes left. So, let's see what you got. But what have you been thinking about this series so far? Do you think I'm being a little too harsh? Do you feel I'm just about right? Let me know down in the comments. Let's talk everything Godzilla and Monarch Legacy of Monsters down there. I've been the Punk Otaku Scribe, and I'll see you in the next one.